You ever notice how some people, they just seem to have this extra something, this like, I don't know, an extra gear. They just sort of, when they come up against a challenge, they have this energy that helps them, really reach their full potential. And that's what we're going to get into today on the deep dive.
Yeah, we're going deep on confidence today. We've got research from all sorts of places, really. We're talking like how animals in labs act, what's going on in our brains, the whole neurology thing. Oh, and psychology studies too. And then we even have some really cool stories for people who, have really pushed their limits. And all this is for you.
Yeah, for you, the listener. We want to make this whole topic, confidence, which everyone talks about, but no one really seems to understand. We want to make it understandable. So we're going to cut through all the complicated research stuff and just give you the good stuff.
We've got a lot of interesting stuff from all these sources. We've got different situations where confidence shows up or doesn't show up and why. We've looked at, is it in our genes? And we've even found some ways that you can, actually build your own confidence. It's pretty cool.
So let's start with some basic questions, right? I mean, is it true that men are more confident than women? And what even is confidence, really? I mean, is it something we're born with? And can we get more of it? That's the big question, right?
Right. And I think when you think of confidence, at first you might think, oh, it's just feeling good about yourself or I can do this. But our research shows it's actually way more complex than that.
It is. It's not just giving yourself a pep talk in the mirror or just feeling, good for a second. One of the experts we read actually said that confidence is, and I'm quoting here, the purity of action produced by a mind free of doubt. Love that. So it's about just doing stuff without second guessing yourself, So for you, the listener, that might mean starting with learning to quiet that inner critic that always pops up.
And another way to think about it is wholeheartedness. You're all in, you're present, there's no holding back. And then some people talked about confidence as this sort of energy, like a driving force moving you forward. And, this is all way deeper than just repeating affirmations in the mirror.
Totally. Just saying I'm awesome over and over doesn't automatically make you believe it or want to. Try new things, right?
Okay.
And, getting compliments is nice and all, but it's not a solid base for real confidence. You can't just rely on other people to tell you you're good at stuff all the time.
Right. And something that came up a lot in the research was this idea of a confidence gap, especially between men and women. There was this study in the UK back in 2011, and it found that half of British women, so 50%, said they had self-doubt about their work and careers. But for men, it was way less than a third.
Yeah, and you see that everywhere, right? I mean, think about those meetings where you have these super smart women, but they don't speak up. Or women who don't, want to go for leadership roles or ask for more money. It's almost and maybe it's because of how society is, but women feel like they need to be totally perfect before they do anything. They're scared to make a mistake.
Yeah, and then you look at how men do things, and it's they often just act confident, even if they don't really know what they're doing, And there's research that shows that this, projected confidence, sadly, can sometimes be more important than actually being good at something.
That's where this guy Anderson comes in. His research looked at how people who act confident, they have certain, body language and ways of talking. They stand tall, their voice is lower, and they speak up first and often, without getting all flustered. And it's interesting because it doesn't really matter if they're actually good at something. People like them more and see them as higher status. Kind of messed up when you think about it.
It is. But Anderson also said the best kind of confidence, the kind that really works, it's not just an act, right? It comes from truly believing in yourself. He said that fake confidence, it usually shows, little unconscious things that give it away. People can sense when someone is just putting on a show.
It's so interesting, right? Even women who are at the top of their game, super successful, they still talk about feeling self-doubt.
Yeah.
Elaine Chao, she was in the government, high-level stuff, and she said she doubted herself all the time. And Clara Shih, this woman who graduated top of her class in computer science at Stanford and started this huge tech company, she said she felt like an imposter all the time.
Yeah.
It's crazy how even people who are killing it still feel this way.
It makes you wonder, where does this feeling of confidence or lack of it even come from, right? Is it just in our DNA? So we learned some science stuff about this whole genes thing. There's this thing called the serotonin transporter gene, and they studied this in monkeys too. And it seems like it might be linked to how anxious we are naturally and how well we handle stress.
And there's also this idea that maybe men's and women's brains are a little different. and it might make a difference in how confident they are, especially when they're younger. Like, some studies have shown that there are differences in the parts of the brain that deal with language and emotions versus like spatial stuff. And then hormones can also mess with how much risk we're willing to take and how we deal with conflict.
But, and this is super important, the science stuff also says that we're not stuck with the brain we're born with. All the stuff that happens to us, like the challenges we face, the lessons we learn, all that shapes our brains too. It's called brain plasticity, and it basically means that your brain can change and grow throughout your whole life. So yeah, genes might give you a starting point, but it's not the end of the story.
That brings us to this really big idea from the research. Confidence isn't just a feeling, it's about doing things. One of the people we read about, she told this story about being in this super important meeting and feeling totally lost and full of self-doubt. But she made herself speak up anyway, and guess what? Wasn't that bad. Actually, it was like a turning point for her.
Exactly. When you do something, even if it's scary and it turns out okay, it makes you believe in yourself more. But the opposite is true too. If you're scared to fail, you might not do anything and then you just stay stuck, There was the study where women skipped test questions they thought they might get wrong, even though they knew the answers. It's like that fear stopped them from showing what they could do.
That's where this idea of failing fast comes in. It's about, like, being okay with messing up, but learning from it quickly. Instead of being scared of not being perfect, you just go for it, One person we read about, she actually started doing speeches without a script on purpose, just to get comfortable with not being perfect. And this other person, this lawyer, she said that learning from her mistakes early on was super important for her success later. And even things like, leaving a bad relationship, that can build confidence too.
Yeah. So we've been talking about actually doing things, but there's also stuff inside our heads that can mess with our confidence, like those negative automatic thoughts, they call them gnats, those little doubts and criticisms that just pop up even when you don't want them to.
Oh my gosh, those.
Yeah.
Like right after you say something, you think, ugh, that was so dumb. Or when you have a new challenge, it's like, I'll never be able to do this. Those little thoughts, they can really add up and make you feel bad about yourself.
The research says that to deal with those gnats, you got to first notice them, like really catch them when they happen. And then you got to argue with them, like instead of thinking I'm so inefficient, maybe you think, okay, I have a lot on my plate right now and I'm trying my best. It sounds simple, but changing how you think can really change how you feel about yourself. There was even this study where people wrote down their negative thoughts and then threw the paper away, and it actually helped.
And then there's this whole overthinking thing. Women especially tend to dwell on stuff, like replaying conversations over and over in their heads. It's exhausting, and it can make you more anxious and even depressed. One of the people we learned about, she talked about stressing for days over a work decision that wasn't even that big of a deal.
And then there's perfectionism. That need to have everything be perfect, it can actually stop you from getting things done. You procrastinate, you obsess over little details, and you might not even start something because you're waiting to feel perfectly ready, which never happens.
So besides all that stuff inside our heads, the research also talked about how, society and stuff can affect our confidence, especially for women. There's this thing called the double bind, where if women act assertive, like, something that people like in men, they get judged and labeled.
It's so true. Remember how Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin were treated in the 2008 election? It was totally different. People judged their personalities and stuff in a way that you don't really see with male politicians. And women also tend to put themselves down more, like making jokes about themselves. And while that can be funny sometimes, it can also make people think they're not as good as they really are.
But there's good news too, like playing sports, especially team sports. When you're a girl, it seems to be really good for you. Studies show that girls who play sports in high school are more likely to be successful in college and their careers. It's like learning to win and lose on the field teaches you resilience, teamwork, and how to believe in yourself.
Exactly. And even the rough housing that boys do, it can actually help them later on. They get used to being criticized and teased, so they develop thicker skin,
So with all these things affecting our confidence, the question is, how do we get more of it? The research gave us some good tips. One of them is self-compassion. And this isn't about being easy on yourself or making excuses. It's about treating yourself with kindness, like you would treat a friend who's going through a rough time.
Self-compassion can actually make you more confident because it makes you feel safe to take risks. It's like, even if you mess up, you'll be kind to yourself, not super critical.
And another cool idea is to shift your focus from me to we. especially when you're in a group and feeling a little shaky. Research says that when people, especially women, stop worrying about proving themselves and instead focus on helping the group as a whole, they actually feel more confident.
Learning to handle criticism is also super important. Instead of taking it personally, try to see it as information about your skills or how you did something. One tip was to actually practice how you'll respond to common criticisms, so you're not caught off guard. And on the other hand, you gotta own your accomplishments and accept compliments. Don't put yourself down when someone says something nice.
And then there's this idea of mastery, which you get through hard work and practice, not by trying to be perfect. We heard about this basketball player who had a rough first season, and then she just practiced and practiced until she totally mastered her shooting technique. And that made her so much more confident.
And don't forget about how you talk. You know that upspeak thing where your voice goes up at the end of a sentence like it's a question? That can make you sound less confident. The advice we saw was simple: say it with confidence.
There were also some quick tips, like practicing gratitude, breaking big tasks into smaller ones, getting enough sleep, exercising, hanging out with friends, and even trying power poses. But they also said to not just fake it till you make it, because that can actually make you more anxious.
So how do we raise kids to be confident? Well, it was interesting to see the difference between how Western cultures and Asian cultures think about struggling. In a lot of Asian cultures, struggling is seen as a good thing, like it helps you grow. But in the West, it can be seen as a sign that you're not smart enough.
That's so true. And that's why it's important to praise kids for their effort and progress, not just for getting things perfect. There's this worry that if we praise kids too much for everything, they'll be scared to try anything new because they don't want to mess up.
And instead of just saying good job all the time, try to be specific. I really like how you put all the spoons on the table. And even more importantly, let kids mess up sometimes. They need to learn from their mistakes.
And especially with girls, we got to encourage them to be more assertive and speak their minds. Sometimes girls are so focused on being good that they don't learn to stand up for themselves. So even if they're being a little bossy, don't criticize them too much.
And it's so important for women to support each other, especially at work. Women in leadership roles, they need to encourage other women to speak up and share their ideas. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not just be sympathetic, but give honest feedback and push them to step outside their comfort zone.
Oh, and one more thing. There was this research that said just repeating positive affirmations might not work for everyone, especially people with really low self-esteem.
We even heard about this amazing woman who, broke all the rules in her village. She became a bank manager and then a member of parliament. It's a great example of how you can break free from all those limiting beliefs. So we've come full circle back to this idea of confidence being both an art and a science. We talked about genes before and how they might give us a starting point. But remember, genes aren't destiny. Our experiences, our choices, and what we do, all that matters way more.
And another thing, confidence in women might look different than confidence in men. It's not always about being loud and aggressive. It can also be about listening, working together, and having this quiet but strong belief in yourself.
That basketball player we talked about before, she's a perfect example. Her confidence, it wasn't just something she was born with. She worked hard for it, she practiced, and she overcame her doubts. And that kind of confidence, it's something we can all achieve.
So, to wrap things up, here's what we learned. Confidence is a mix of our genes, our environment, what we tell ourselves, and most importantly, what we do. It's not about being perfect or bragging all the time. It's about believing in yourself, being able to bounce back from setbacks, and just being willing to try new things.
And even though society can affect how confident we feel, a lot of it is actually up to us. We can challenge those negative thoughts and push ourselves to do things, even when it's scary.
So here's something to think about this week. What's one thing in your life where you've been holding back because of self-doubt? What's one little thing you can do to challenge that? Give it a try and see what happens.